Hello, I'm Sarah Lister from Sheffield Digital, and today I'm talking to Luke Jennings, who is a software tester at the University of Sheffield. Luke, what are the priority tasks and responsibilities of your job?
Mostly working in automation testing at the moment. My main priority tasks really are developing that for myself and the team. It's a bit of a new role for our team, really. We had a automation tester in on a sort of temporary contract, and he moved on to other things. I remember my boss coming to me, and we were looking at getting someone new in, but I'd always been fascinated by automation. So and I've been making attempts in my spare time to learn some of it myself. So this is Vimes, by the way.
Your cat wants to steal the show.
He does. He really does. I knew this would happen. That's why I closed the door. So basically, she said to me, "Why don't you take on the role? You can spend some time learning it." There were some projects coming up that required automation, but nothing high pressure. Nothing with a deadline. So it seemed ideal. So a lot of what I've been doing as my main responsibilities are developing the skills both for myself and the team, basically broadening the understanding of automation within the team, and sort of developing what we can use it for, how we can decide what to use it for, and where it fits in with the wider department. And while I've been doing that, I've been managing the existing automation frameworks that we've got. So we had some work with a couple of external companies for a couple of different projects, and each of those projects left us with very different automation frameworks performing very different purposes on very different applications. So it's kind of been digging into those, learning what they're doing, why they're doing it, and basically making sure that they continue to work by finding bugs, finding problems or errors or things that have changed in the system that need updating in the framework, and working with a couple of other people in the team to keep on top of that. So it's really interesting.
And if there's anyone watching who doesn't really know what automation is or what it means, are you able to just sort of briefly explain?
Yeah. So test automation is basically a way of using code to automate what would otherwise potentially be manual tests. So one of the frameworks I'm working with is effectively clicking around a series of web pages, creating users or creating modules for the university, and then deleting those modules or editing them. And it's quite a long process to do that in the regression testing. So the automation framework, basically, it can run it itself overnight on a virtual machine to hopefully take off some of the pressure and time constraints on the manual testers. It can also be used for other things as well. So the first framework we used was using the automation framework to input users into a database, trigger the scripts that manage those users, so sort of creating and deleting accounts, suspending users' access, things like that, and then reading the results and saying, did the script managing the database do the correct thing with that user? So that there was never even a user interface for that. There was nothing to click around. It was using the automation to poke the information in, trigger the scripts, and then read what came out of them. So like I said, two very different frameworks. So I think that's a basic description of some of the things automation can do.
What is it about that type of work that you find so interesting?
So the thing that I find the most interesting, I've always enjoyed learning new things, especially when it comes to learning by doing. So there's been a huge amount of that for me in this role. I've done training courses online, Ministry of Testing, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, things like that. But what I've enjoyed the most is just diving into the framework, looking at one of the test scripts, the long list of things that it should be doing, and almost like pulling on a thread to unravel exactly how it's doing it, why it's doing it, what methods, what bits of code is it calling from elsewhere in the framework. When it says create a user, how does the code know how to do that? Follow that thread, find all of the steps it does to say where it should click, where it should get the username from, where it should how it decides on a password, things like that. I find that absolutely fascinating, just following those threads and changing something and seeing how it breaks it. Or if something's broken already, changing something and seeing if it fixes it. So just following a Google thread of what I could do to solve the problem, and visualizing the data, visualizing how it travels through the code. So if I've got a user, where's it going? What pipes is it being directed down through whatever system it's using? I often find myself when I'm trying to explain it to other people, thinking I look like a conspiracy theorist with a board up behind me with red string connecting all different pictures of where the code is. Because as you can probably tell from my somewhat rambling answer, I get quite excited about it and really enjoy thinking about it, discussing it with my colleagues, and coming up with ideas. So yeah, that's probably what I find the most interesting in the role.
It sounds like the sort of work that you could almost get a bit lost in, like lose track of time, and this sort of kind of problem solving. And
oh, absolutely. I've ended up working late a few times just because I've been that close to solving a problem, to finally getting a successful run of the tests, because I've just discovered the missing variable that it required, and I'm like, right, okay, I know it's 5:30, but I've just got to run it one more time to get it to work.
Okay, great. And how did you learn the skills for this role?
There's been a lot of learning by doing, like I was saying, which is good, considering that's what I said. It's one of the things I find very interesting. When I started as a software tester, my first day on the job was spent Googling what is a software tester.
That's where I hope a lot of people are now, and that's
yeah.
why they're watching this video.
Well, if it can be of help, then that'd be excellent. Because yeah, I've worked a lot of jobs, but I started working in IT as a data analyst, and I was working on a project for the university, analysing the user data we had in our systems. And when it came time for the project to sort of develop new systems to start, we didn't actually have an internal software team in the department, software testing team, sorry. So my boss asked me, would you like to be the software tester? Since I'd got experience in, I used to work in medical research, so I'd got experience with testing to an extent. I'd already been working on the project. I understood what the goals were. So I said yes. And yeah, spent my first day on the job Googling what is a software tester, talking to anyone that I could about what I should be looking into, what I should be learning. And I was pretty much thrown in at the deep end with it must have been 350-step test script sent to us by the company we were working with. A link to the application, and said, right, off you go. And by the time it came around to sort of further iterations, I'd learned how to improve the test script, make it a bit more efficient. And then as we started adding members to the team, and we got a test manager and people who knew more about what they were doing, I had people that I could ask and learn more about what makes a good tester, how good testing can be done. And it was similar when I came to start working on automation, because we got an external company in to help us with a testing project, and they basically worked on building this massive automation script. And for me, after sending me a few links of sort of learning JavaScript and things like that, the business said, right, have a go. Here is a script from the system you need to test. It's written in Perl, so have a go at learning to read that. Here are the files we have already written for making tests. Here is how they link together. See if you can do your own. And basically, yeah, I just dove in headfirst and started writing my own scripts, getting lots and lots of errors, lots of things not working. A lot of errors simply not necessarily being to do with the script, but simply being because I didn't understand the code all that well. So putting semicolons in the wrong place, or not declaring a variable early enough, linking to the wrong method. But over time, it got a lot easier, it got a lot clearer, and it got to the point where when I took on, so we finished off that project, moved on to others. I had a bit of time before the next project started to follow some online training courses and test out building my own frameworks. So I had to go at building one for automating Windows, which was incredibly frustrating, but a lot of fun. Just sort of running it on my own laptop, watching it sort of disconnect and reconnect a printer. Like, yes, it worked. And then finally, when it got round to the project I'm currently working on, we basically handed over an already complete framework, which unfortunately had a lot of problems. So I was able to use the knowledge I'd gained there to, again, dive right in. So it wasn't written in one of the languages I'd worked in before. It wasn't, I'd mostly worked in JavaScript. This one was in Java. So it was jumping right, okay, how does Java work? What can I learn from this? How can I understand that? And again, more learning the skills for the role, and not only figuring out how to read the code and edit it, but also how can I improve the code? What practices that I've learned can I bring in to make it more efficient or more reliable, or even easier for people not working with the code to understand what it's doing? If one of the manual testers comes to me and says, we'd like to add a new test to it, I can explain to them how I'd need to code it, what I'd need to do to make it work, and they can see, or I can work towards making it so that they can see the script and understand what it's doing and whether I've interpreted their request correctly. So lots and lots of learning by doing, which is great.
Is that also how you learned to play guitar?
Pretty much, yeah. It was a similar thing. I had lessons. I had teachers to teach me for years and years and years, but I never listened to them. I much preferred to get a song off a CD and try to play along to it, or find guitar tablatures online and learn from those. I remember one day coming to my guitar teacher and asked me, "Have you learned the scales that I set you for homework?" I said, "No, but I've learned to play Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix." And it sort of, you could see this on his face. He was annoyed that I hadn't learned the scales, but he was impressed that I'd learned a Hendrix song. So it was, yeah, that's. I think that's been mostly the way I've learned things all my life, and it's great to have a job where that is mostly what I'm doing. It's the thing that I enjoy doing, is learning, and my job is almost entirely at the moment learning new things, which is fantastic.
I imagine it requires quite a bit of patience sometimes. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the scripts I'm running at the moment can take 20 or 30 minutes to run. And if there's an error in them in the last few steps, you can find yourself waiting for a long time to, oh, there goes the cat, waiting for a long time to actually get a result. And when you're looking at a set of methods that's 1,500 lines of code, you need to be very patient and logical in going through it to actually figure out what is causing the error. Like, even if the script failing kicks out the exact line that is failing, you've still got to think, why is that failing? You've got to go step by step through the solutions. Could it be that something has changed on the website? Could it be that something in the script is wrong? I think there was one problem where it was failing to click on one of the buttons, and the button was there. Everything in the script was correct. Everything on the page was the same as it was been. And in the end, the solution, after going step by step through all the problems, was instead of trying to click on it, was to tell the keyboard to press enter on it. Because for whatever reason, it didn't like clicking on it. And it's sort of not something you'd necessarily think of straight away until you've spent 3-4 hours testing out every other possible solution. And in the end, it worked, and the test went through and passed, and it was satisfying, to say the least.
What's it like working for the University of Sheffield?
I can honestly say, and I put this in my notes as the first point, I can honestly say it's the best place I've ever worked. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Because it's an academic environment. We're supporting not just students, but lecturers and researchers. It's not a business in the same sense as others. So the people that are there, the people that are working for IT services at the university, they're there because they want to be, rather than for careers or promotions or money or success in sort of make it big and make a splash on the tech scene or whatever. They're there because they're genuinely interested in the work. They're genuinely interested in helping the university be better for the students and the staff, which means everyone's always very keen to get involved in a problem. There's a few people that I know, if I've got an issue with something I'm working on, I can give them a call and we can sit and ramble about this issue, sort of just talk on it and figure out problems for hours and come up with creative solutions, which it's a really nice environment to be in. And it also means that everyone's very supportive. In my team, my colleagues and my boss as well are some of the most supportive people I know. I've got some health issues that have meant at times I've found it hard to keep up with the work I've been doing, and I've never had anything but encouragement and support in helping to get around those. And at the same time, I've talked about the different work that I've been doing, the different applications. The university is big. There's so many different systems, services, applications, all going on. So it's very rare that you get sat working on one thing forever. So there's always something new to do, always something new to try as well. But at the same time, because it's so big and there's so much, it's a really interesting challenge to bring about change, to implement new methods, new systems. So you get to not just think about the technology side of it, but the human side of it. How can I promote what I'm doing? How can bringing in the test team as a new team, where previously there was no centralized test resource for the department, has been a 3-year process. The entire time I've been there, it's been integrating it into the wider department, getting other teams involved so that if a project's starting, they can get in touch with us early on and we can be involved in advising them on how to optimize what they're doing for testing, how to help them get the best product before it's released, before it even comes into test. What can we do to help with that? And it's sort of like there's a metaphor I've heard. I can't remember the whole one, but it's like turning an oil tanker. It's a big, slow process. It doesn't happen straight away, but when you see it happening, when you suddenly realize, oh, we've gone from nobody even knows about the test team to as soon as anyone even has an idea of a project coming in, we get an email saying, we've got this project, can we talk about you with it? Talk about it with you. And it's really satisfying to see the impact that you can have on something so huge as the university and all its systems. And when it does work, and you get that satisfied response of knowing that you've helped get something out there that's better than it would have been otherwise, it's a good feeling.
And you've had a few different roles with the University of Sheffield, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I started at the university. I did a master's back in 2012 in molecular medicine, and I started working in medical research. So I started in the dental school doing tissue engineering, sort of building sort of living models of skin for testing sort of different drug treatments on, which was very challenging and very interesting. And then when the funding sort of finished for that, I worked in the neuroscience department doing a sort of a similar thing, but modeling sort of nerve growth under Alzheimer's conditions, which again, very challenging and very interesting. But sort of I found myself, because research in that way, it's very dependent on project funding. So it wasn't as secure as a job as I'd like. So I started looking into other things. And I realized I had quite a lot of strength in data analysis, sort of transferable skills in that sort of way of I'd taken for some of the work I'd done, I'd have sort of 16,000 data points of results from an experiment, and it's like, right, okay, how do I interpret and analyze those? So coming out of research, I thought that's where I should look. And I had a friend who already worked in IT services, who said, you know what, look for a job here. I think you'd get on really well there. They're the kind of department where once they've got someone, they want to keep them, they want to develop their skills and have them grow within the department, rather than just sort of it being a stopgap kind of job that some people might look for. And I think I got lucky. I applied for the data analysis job, and my boss at the time, after I got the job, told me that one of the reasons they took me on was because I wasn't an IT person.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people coming for jobs in the IT department would be coming from an IT background, either having done a degree in it or worked in it before. And I thought that I'd got most of the skills, but not coming from IT, perhaps I'll be able to bring something different to how to analyze the data. And I'd like to think that I did, and that's what led to me working in the software testing role.
Incredible. That's a really incredible story. These are the sorts of stories we want to share with the community, because we hope that some people are maybe drawn towards getting into these types of roles, even if they don't have a background in it necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. I'd never, until this one friend suggested I look for a position here, I'd have never thought it was an option. Based on my background, I've always been interested in computers. I've built my own gaming PC that I've got in another room. I have a memory of being about 11 years old, trying to hack one of the games I had to put cheats into it so it would be easier. And actually, it was one of the older types of games where the code for it isn't as well hidden, so you could get into the files and try and change things. I remember sitting there trying to do that at 11 years old. So it's something that's always interested me, but I never really thought of it as a career until I almost by chance ended up in it. So if by doing this and talking about it, I can maybe help someone who had a similar background to me and never thought of it as a possibility because of the choices they made in their education, then then that'd be excellent.
It's interesting to think about how you do this job, and you're obviously very dedicated to it and spend hours, at computers and working on this. But then you have this almost like another life of like your band and doing gigs and recording music. Do you sometimes feel like you've got like two different lives?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That I mean, since COVID, the gigging and doing band stuff hasn't been as frequent, but certainly before then, it very much was two jobs, two lives. I had my work life where I plaited my beard and tied my hair back and dressed slightly smarter. But then I'd have my band life where I'd let my hair down, let the beard down, dress in all black with my leather jacket and turn up and get up on a stage. And I mean, in varying different places, whether it's a festival to 3,000 people or a dive bar in Edinburgh, sort of off a back street with 10 people at the back. It was two very different lives, but at the same time, it feels like it gels together in a way. Like the creativity that comes from playing music has actually been really helpful in figuring out code. It's one of the things with playing an instrument is I remember reading some research articles about it. I'm always finding, with the interest in science, I'm always finding research about things that I do in real life and getting very intently interested in it. Playing music, it rewires your brain to detect and correct errors very quickly. Because if you're playing on a stage, especially the sort of proggy Hendrixy type music I play, I'm playing lots of guitar solos, and if I hit a wrong note, I need to know about it and correct it instantly before anyone in the audience notices. So your brain's sort of almost working in overdrive at that time. You get very much in the zone and in a flow where if something isn't right, you see it, you figure out how to fix it, and you fix it before you even realize you've done it. And I think that's sort of transferred quite nicely over to working in code, because it might not be quite as quick and there might not be 3,000 people watching me do it. But, excuse me. But it's that same do something, see an error, fix it process, just sort of slowed down and broadened. So it all links together in a really unexpected way, which is, it's nice to know actually that it's not two separate things entirely. It can all work together.
How would you say the university supports your career development?
So in lots of ways, really. I mean, as I've said about the steps my career's taken, it seems to always be changing and growing. And that has been largely down to the support of the university, of the exec, all the way down to managers and even colleagues. A colleague of mine and I, we often share videos that we find online of sort of interesting topics about testing that we've just come across through our own Googling and what have you. But then you can sort of take it up a step, and I've had no questions asked funding approved for online courses, whether it's Udemy or getting my ISTQB, my testing certification. It was not, there was no battle to get the funding for it. There was no questions of why do you need it. It was, this will help you. Okay, good. So it's very easy to get onto training courses. But also with it being an academic environment, there's staff members from different departments run courses on certain things that you can go to. So I attended a course on Python coding that was run by a member of the research IT team, which was incredibly useful, because that was when I was just starting just before I started automation and was sort of trying to expand my interest in it. So I learned, while I probably can't really remember much about Python itself, I sort of learned how the code works, how code in general can achieve things and manipulate data, which was very useful. But it's also just the support in, oh, this is something you're interested in. Well, here is a project you can work on. Here's looking at web testing. There's a dedicated team for developing and testing and managing the university's website. So we had a meeting with the guy that runs the automated tests for that. And he took us through their framework and what they've used to build it. And even more interestingly, how they've built it in with accessibility testing. So making sure it follows the legal guidelines by using automation. So we got to have a long chat with him where he talked about how that works. So there's so many opportunities for finding what you're interested in and doing it. And that's the best way I can think of that they've supported my career development, is just allowing me to find what I'm interested in and give it a go. And then once I've started, giving me the support to carry on and get better at it. Because yeah, when I started, I did not know code, I did not know automation, and now I am one of 3 automation testers managing the whole project for automation.
And what's been like the time scale of that? How many years has that taken to get to the position you're in now?
So I've been a tester for 3 years. My first year was doing mostly manual testing. That's where I did my ISTQB, and it's where I started to investigate automation as a thing. 2021, January, was when we started working on the large project with the external company that I mentioned earlier. And I basically spent 6 months just intensely focused on that. And then it was the sort of following 6 months of continuing to develop that, trying new things. And then it was towards the end of 2021 was when our automation tester left, and my boss said, well, why don't you take over? So myself and another manual tester on the team who had an interest in automation just took over the role. So yeah, it's been a little under 3 years to go from knowing nothing to being where I am now. And I couldn't have done it without the support of my boss, Charlotte, and my colleagues. So yeah, very, very, very grateful to them for the support that they've given me.
You shared a bit about your background in higher education. Do you think that this has had a strong impact on your job opportunities and career decisions?
I think so. It's an interesting one. When I was reading this question, when you sent it to me before, I struggled over how to answer it. It's been both a blessing and a curse in some ways. So my first degree was in biology at the University of York, and at the time I wanted to be a teacher. So I did a PGCE, and I was a teacher for a year and decided it wasn't for me. So I came back to Sheffield, where I'm from, and did a master's. And it felt almost for a while like I'd locked myself into a path. Like I didn't have the chance. I couldn't look for other things. While I was working in teaching, it was I could only look for teaching jobs. When I started working in science and was looking for something new, it was I could only look for jobs in research. And it felt like a very narrow path. And when I did start looking for things outside of science, because of the level of education I'd got, I felt like I wasn't being given the opportunity to try new things, because either, you know, if it was an entry-level position into something new that I wanted to work on, there might be the assumption that, oh, he's got all these qualifications, this is just a stopgap for him, he'll leave as soon as he finds something better. Or the alternative of he's really super focused in these skills, so he's not going to have the skills we need for this. And it took a while to kind of understand what transferable skills I'd gained from my education and from the work I'd done that was directly following on from that education. And I had to sort of reframe how I thought about it, how my education, the degree in the master's, that wasn't what I needed in order to do the work that I wanted to do. That was an experience that had given me a set of skills rather than a degree, if that makes sense. And that's how I went into the interview with IT services. Instead of talking about what I'd learned on my degree and whatnot, I talked about how it given me a attention to detail, an ability to express myself, doing lots of presentations. I'd presented at an international conference, and we often did group presentations while I was working in the dental school, where you'd get up. We sort of rotated around all of the researchers, PhD students, master students, what have you, and would take turns each week to present our work to the whole group. So I'd learned to express myself a bit more, and it was that from the education that I felt was the biggest benefit. I know when people have asked me before about what is the point in university, what is the point in higher education nowadays when everyone's doing it? It's not the guaranteed job that it might have been a generation ago. And for me, it's not the degree you get, but the experience you gain. And if you get involved, if you find the things you are interested in the broader sort of sphere of education, then you can gain a lot more than just what your degree is, and it can open up a whole lot of doors if you then know how to express that and how to get that out there when you're thinking about a career.
Yes, I have to agree, actually, because I remember from doing presentations at university as well, I did build my confidence to be able to do that, and like you say, to learn to take information and then deliver it to people in a way that that's
absolutely,
I think that's really important.
And critical thinking as well, then whether that's for a job or just in this day and age, it's such a useful skill. And doing exams and essays and presentations and interpreting results and feeding them back in a different way, it's all useful, not just for a career, but just for life in general, I think.
Yeah, because I studied history at university, and then I really wasn't sure which avenue to go down in terms of my career. But then I ended up becoming a data analyst. And it's thinking back now, I realise that there was that connection, because with history, I was always going deeper into the subject to find out more. And the sort of problem solving techniques of looking at different sides of the argument and things, and how I could then use that for
absolutely
as a data analyst, which wasn't obvious to begin with.
I can absolutely understand that. I've currently or recently gained a fascination with history, and listening to lots of podcasts and reading things, and all of the conflicting information that you get out of places, and how do you interpret that? How do you decide whether the Catholic priest writing about how it was right of Mary to burn people is right, or the Protestant person? Sorry, that's exactly what the podcast I'm listening to at the moment is dealing with. Is how do you decide who was right? And he presents, here is a bit of text written by a Catholic priest. Here's one written by a Protestant priest. They disagree. Surprise, surprise. How do we know who is right? And that sort of analysis, critical thinking, that critical analysis, join them together. I can understand how history would lead to data analysis and be incredibly useful for that as well. So it's fascinating.
Definitely, and it still helps me now, like you say, with like critical thinking and things like that. So although history you might sort of think, oh, you know, you're going to end up either being a historian or a librarian or something. Actually, the skills can be adapted to so many different other roles.
Absolutely.
Yes. So finally, if someone wants to take an initial step towards working as a software tester or an automation tester, what do you think is the best thing to do?
So first step for me would be find out what being a software tester actually means. I remember when I was younger, before I really even knew that it was a valid career choice, I wanted to be a video games tester. I thought that is the best job I could ever have. My fiance, before we met, was a video games tester, worked on one of the biggest releases of the last 10 years. And from what she tells me about working as a video games tester, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. It's not the job that teenage me imagined it would be. So learn what being a software tester actually means, what it actually is. And once you're sure that it's what you want to do, once you've got that interest in it, there's so many resources online to learn the skills required for it, free or otherwise. You know, there's a lot of YouTube courses that are sort of condensed versions of one you might find somewhere like Udemy or LinkedIn Learning, done by the same person, almost like as a teaser for their 100-hour long course. And you can gain really good knowledge from there. And then just start doing some testing. Find a website, find an application, something you already use, and think about how would you test it. One example my other half gave me when I was first starting was you're wanting to make a cup of tea, test the process for it, and and sort of, and that was all the questions she gave me. And it was like, okay, so I need to test: is the kettle plugged in? Is the plug turned on? Does the kettle even work? Does the kettle have water in it, or is it something else? Does the kettle already have coffee in it? If so, that might be a bug. So there's lots of ways that you can develop that skill, and if you can show, you know, when you start looking for jobs that you've done things like this, that you've actually done it for yourself. A lot of places won't look at you and go, oh, you've not got the job experience of it. They'll look at, oh, they've gone out of their way in their spare time to learn this, to actually do it themselves. And from what they're saying, it seems like they've got the hang of it. Perhaps we can bring them on and develop those skills. Because I think a lot of jobs would rather do that, would rather bring someone new in and build them up, because everywhere is different in terms of how they do their testing, what their protocols are, what they want out of a tester. So you'll get a lot of companies that will look at someone new and say, ah, yes, we can mold them. We can mold them to be, I said that in a really creepy voice. We can mold them into the tester that we want them to be. So even if you've not got the job experience, it can be a good opportunity. And for a university specific example as well, you know, if anyone at the University of Sheffield happens to be watching this, there is a summer internship program, and we actually took on an intern last year to work with me on the big complicated project I was working on last year. And so he, over the 100 hours that he worked with us, spread over about 7 weeks, you know, he'd already got experience in coding, but not necessarily in the language we were working in, and he'd never done testing in a sort of structured environment. So he went away having basically learned how testing works, built his own test within our framework that is still used. You know, I didn't go in and change it or fix it or anything. He learned and built this set of tests for himself that worked. So he was also able to get involved with the manual testing as well, so the developing of test scripts and the skills that you need to build up to be able to be an effective automation tester as well. So there is opportunity within the university as well, and I'm sure there are probably other places around that may do those sorts of things to gain that experience. So that's quite a useful resource, I guess.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing a bit of your story and some great advice as well.
No problem. I hope I haven't rambled too much.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, thank you for having me on.